Welcome to the Dynasty Effect, where the legacy of the Clash of Dynasties docuseries doesn't end, but continues.
This is a podcast that puts it all together, you know?
This is the Dynasty Effect.
Welcome to the Dynasty Effect. I am your host and executive producer, Ben Hatta, and with me is Frank Favaro from Welsh Jesuit and president of ServCentric. Frank, how are you, sir?
I'm good, Ben. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing well. We've got another episode. We're going to get right to it. We got a lot of things to talk about today. Our guest is John Vaughn. Now, when I say the name John Vaughn, I'm going to ask you, what your thoughts are. But right away, I mean, he's not from St. Ed's. He didn't go to Walsh. Why bring him on? Is maybe the first question people ask. But what do you think of when I say the name John Vaughn?
Think of rivalry. The rivalry that he had with Clint Musser, who was my teammate, right? And Clint, I was a freshman, and Clint had already won, 2 state titles and was going after 4. And John Vaughn was in the way. And they had this epic rivalry that lasted the entire season and went down to, as we'll talk about today, the final match, right? And it was really, really just interesting to watch how that rivalry drove, I imagine, both of those competitors. So I'm excited to have John on today. It'll be great.
Yeah, John, the first thing I think of when I think of John Vaughn is he always pulled his socks down over the top of his shoes. And I always thought it was like the coolest thing, like covering his laces. I'd never seen anyone do that before. I think Teague Moore might have done it later. And I saw him do it on the national circuit. But that's what I think of him is when he had his socks pulled over his laces on his wrestling shoes. But anyway, he was a 2-time Ohio State champ. He was part of Clash of Dynasties, even though he was sort of a fringe. But he had a very integral role in our story. He's a 4-time NCAA qualifier for the University of Illinois, a 4-time Big Ten placer. He went into the military. He was commissioned and served in the Marines. He's got a Purple Heart, and he's just been promoted to Brigadier General. Please welcome to the Dynasty Effect, everyone, John Vaughn.
You're looking at John Vaughn.
John Vaughn.
John Vaughn.
Vaughn.
Undefeated Jonathan Vaughn.
Vaughn, a real prodigy. Didn't start till the 8th grade. By the 9th grade, he was already a state qualifier. AAU national runner-up already.
Oh!
He's got it right to his bat! Boy, just a strength move there.
Ah, beautiful move. Nice move by Vaughn. And Vaughn gets the takedown. My heavenly days.
Vaughn, of course, an excellent student, already had a full scholarship to Illinois for wrestling.
A 4-time NCAA qualifier.
Case Western Reserve Law degree.
Also enlisted in the Marines.
Wounded in action and awarded the Purple Heart.
Lieutenant Colonel.
The rank of Brigadier General.
Brigadier General.
Brigadier General. Yeah, he's something else.
Jonathan Vaughn.
This is it.
Jonathan Vaughn.
General Vaughn,
How are you? Thanks so much for having me on.
thanks for being here. How are you, sir?
I'm excited to hang out with some of the old crew. It makes me feel young again.
Where do we find you these days?
I'm hanging out in Northern Virginia right now. I'm stationed currently up near the Pentagon. Of my, I think, 12 plus moves now, I'm back in the East Coast.
Wow. 12 moves. That's a lot.
Yeah. 27 years, they don't let you enjoy it. They just keep moving you. So I'm averaging about 2 years in any one place, but I've been around the world about 4 times over at this point.
Do you have a favorite place so far that you've lived?
It's Thailand without question. I lived in Bangkok, Thailand with the family. We lived in Seoul, Korea. We lived in Okinawa, Japan, and a number of other places. But Bangkok rocks. Like, it's no joke. It's cool.
Where, if you were to live in one place, retire in one place in the world, is that where you'd go?
You could definitely make a living off American money there. I'll tell you that. It's funny. In my career, one of my jobs was running embassy security for all East Asia Pacific. So I was headquartered in Bangkok, but I spent my time traveling from Kathmandu, Nepal to Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia to Wellington, New Zealand. And like every week I was on the road traveling. So I can't tell you there's one place I'd love to be, but East Asia is awesome, without question.
Well, moving around all the time, do you feel an itch if you've been in a place too long that you got to be on the road? Are you ready to settle down?
Yeah, I think Rolling Stone grows no moss. I think there is some comfort in that. I look at contemporaries who went to law school and been sitting in the same law firm for 20 some years. And I'm sorry, I'd probably slip my wrist. I couldn't do that. No critique on them, but I liked the change. It reinvigorated me, it kept me excited. Always a new opportunity, new challenge. So I've loved it. Although I think my family has gotten to the point of tapping out. Their fund meter is pegged, and so this will probably be our last stint. But we're going out with the promotion to general, so I'm happy with that.
Nice. Well, we'll get into the general, but let's go all the way back. First of all, I got a question. I think Frank and I are talking about this too. Brakeman, in his highlight reel, I found that he said that you didn't start wrestling to the 8th grade, but I heard you on a podcast talk about how you started wrestling like 5th, 6th, maybe somewhere around there. When did you really start?
Yeah, kind of a weird background because not the conventional wrestling background pedigree. I had some childhood youth issues. Me and Adam Plaus, probably could compare scrap sheets back in the heyday in terms of youth and problems. And I had a good mentor teacher whose son wrestled at North Olmsted, Keith Smith, who actually placed third his senior year, the year they were runner-ups. North Olmsted was runner-up. But Miss Smith looked at my grandparents and said, it's probably a good idea if we direct his energy somewhere. Some of the challenges I was having at school and indiscretions and, me and the 5th grade teacher who didn't really get along. I thought the tax under her tire was a cool idea. The pregnant teacher in the school didn't really like that idea, but what were tax going to do? Come on. But families like that, rather than shun me or turn me away, that family specifically, every week for 2 years, her husband picked me up to play basketball and take me under his wing. Having grown up in the inner city, I was a ward of the state, both in Georgia and Ohio, placed in my maternal grandparents' home, but had some challenges, some difficulties adjusting, and families like Bosniaks who took me in to show me basketball. I thought I was going to be the next Mark Price. Nobody really told me that height matters. Size matters. It does. Me and basketball weren't going to go very far. So Joan Smith stepped in and said, hey, what about wrestling? And so like 6th and 7th grade years, I did YMCA. More just a father with 2 other kids, took me under his wing, showed me it was the Fairview YMCA. Run me around to a bunch of little tournaments, but nothing organized, nothing structured. So it wasn't until 8th grade year that I got into St. Vincent de Paul's wrestling program, which is a quasi feeder for Eds back in the day. And so I had 1 year of CYO. And I know on your Dynasty, they highlight the developmental youth programs and things like that. So I only had 1 year of it. And kind of comical 1 year, dominant. I was riding that year for all it was worth. Coach Gondik at St. Vincent's was, trying to groom me to come to Eds, but ultimately finished 3rd at the CYO tournament. A little disappointing. But I finished 3rd because they're both passed now. Dale Pollock was the coach at Holy Name. Mark Abcali was the coach at Ignatius. Mark had taken me under his wing in the youth program and really through the Ignatius mentorship program. They cooked the books a little bit, that CYO tournament. Dale's son, Brian, was doing well at his school, but they weren't sure he was going to make it to the finals. So they looked at me and they said, hey, what about we put you in the harder half of the bracket? Dan Ambrosiak was ultimately a state champ at Mineral Lake Catholic, was in that bracket with me. And you guys probably remember Sandy Cajo, great ref, Hall of Fame ref in Ohio. Sandy was the ref for that semifinal match. And to this day, Sandy got it wrong. Danny was a feather. I slammed him. It was sitting down just on the side of the mat. Sandy didn't see it that way. Call it an illegal slam, so I lost on a technical. But needless to say, the best I could do at CYO was third. So really wasn't on anybody's radar. You could say that.
All right. So you didn't have all the experience, but you knew a lot of these Walsh guys in that area growing up, right? Or how did you run into, what was your first brush with sort of that Walsh crew, North Akron guys?
Yeah, it's interesting because as I got into wrestling that 8th grade year, Coach Avcol, he took me around to every back alley in Ohio, Streetsboro and otherwise, North Akron. There isn't a weekend that I wasn't on the road competing in the weekend tournaments. Met some of the North Akron folks. But it's interesting that you say, when did I meet the Walsh guys? I was in more with the Eds guys. If I had to say which side of the fence was I on early on in the career, it was probably the Eds side. But in reality, the one critique I had of your Dynasty series, I loved it, by the way. Outstanding. You guys did a great job. The thing I want to emphasize was, it wasn't just the Catholic youth program. If you think back to the dominance of Catholic programs throughout Ohio at that time, from Moeller to Xavier to St. Paris Grams, St. John's, but the thing that stood out to me was Ignatius was the one to first dethrone Eds. So let's not forget that, Ben. 1988, Ignatius run the flag up on you guys and showed the kink in the armor. Mike Buddy, Joe and Marty Collins, all 3 state champs, ran the table of the heavyweights. It showed that Eds was fallible. And Bill Barger and many in the crowd took note of that. And even John Story at St. Joe's, who followed it by winning the state title in 1990. Again, showing the kink, showing how to go about attacking Eds in their historical dynasty. And so that kind of led into, not a design pattern for Bill to follow, but definitely showed him it's achievable. And I think your documentary highlights really well how he stepped back and then came back into the fold and really built that program up. So early on, I was kind of on the Ed side, but then over the years, I was clearly just sitting with the Walsh guys on the side of the map before every tournament because you guys were a little nuts. I mean, we would watch Eddie over there warming up, and Eddie Jane would burn more energy in warm-ups than any of us did the entire year in competition. I mean, it was ridiculous. So I'd be sitting there with Clint and Jimmy and everybody else from Walsh just laughing. I'm like, what the heck is that dude doing over there? It wasn't until that senior year that I became kind of the dark side for you guys at Walsh.
Yeah, you spent a lot of time with us, I think, in the Eagle Club. I think when that summer, that's how I think you and I met each other.
Yeah.
Was when you're showing up in the summer at Eagles Club and you're making the junior team. But what was it like? Like you said, I mean, it felt like everyone else against St. Ed's at this tournaments, and as Walsh was building their program, you were on their side against us. But as you went into sort of your senior year, well, back that up. Your junior year, you run through. You do a great job. You win the state tournament. What was that like capturing that? I mean, again, if you go back to the fact that you didn't come from a wrestling family, a wrestling background, but yet at such a young age, you won a state title.
I mean, it was an interesting developmental path because some people had always asked, well, why didn't you go to Eds? You should have gone to Eds, and I'm not sure I would have developed into the athlete I did had I gone to Eds because, as much as your developmental program and your freshman team, your JV team, blah, 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 I needed to start. I needed to be out there. And so my freshman year, I started, made it to the state tournament as a freshman, really showed growth through that year. And I can remember the first Solon tournament and get my butt handed to me to the end of the year where I'm knocking off Gustovich in the mentor semifinals to get into the district finals against Mahasevich, which was like, an adult versus a baby. I mean, I just got my butt handed to me in that match. But that progression from the beginning of the year to the end of the year to the following season, I was running the table, and probably my sophomore year, I was on track to win the state title. Brakeman had me as number 2. Little known detail, I busted my collarbone and tore my sternum mid-season. And so it happened right before the Christmas break. So I was able to take a period of time to recover and get back on. But as we got to the state meet, I know your story highlighted Sonny Marchetti there at Walsh, but John, his brother, I thought was the better of the two. John and I were slated to meet in the semis at the state meet as a sophomore. I still think I would have kicked his ass, but needless to say, everyone who remembers John, he had a double leg takedown that, he would bore the center of his head straight into your chest and just crush your lungs. Well, the kid who was, dislocated collarbone and torn sternum, that wasn't the ideal, lineup match. And so we made a tactical decision to take a knee medically, not take the risk of re-aggravating the injury. Still regret that to this day, but finished off 5th, beat Gustovich in the place round. So, you look at that freshman and sophomore year progression and development, total maturation and growth as an athlete and as a wrestler that it wouldn't have happened had I just been in the practice room on the freshman or JV team. And then you get to that junior year and I just run the table, 38-0. You showed the highlight there of me taking care of business against the St. Xavier, which was just a slaughter for a major in the state finals. So quite the exciting trajectory then.
John, what do you attribute that progress? So some guys just are so gradual improvement, but you were jumping levels fast.
Yeah.
Where do you attribute that to in that short amount of time?
Yeah, it's I can't say that there's any one thing. I mean, one, determination, just utter determination to succeed. Nobody, as a youth, my grandparents loved me. I'm not gonna lie about that, but did anyone believe I was going to be greatness? No, I was an inner city kid. I was literally inner city Cleveland, running the alleys, trying to avoid the gangs. Nobody thought I could be anything. Nobody thought I would achieve anything. And so there's a chip on your shoulder, much like the North Akron kids. You're there to prove it. Like, I am something, and I'm going to be something. And hooking and jabbing on the varsity that freshman year with a good team, great coaches. We weren't of the caliber of Eds or Walsh necessarily. But by the time I graduated my senior year, we were 5th at states. Chris Gizzy and Pat Eddings and Matt Thompson. I mean, we had a good team. We were competitive. And so the internal drive, but then what Ben highlighted, like how many nights was I over at Ed's, on the weekends in the summer? How many times did I go down to North Akron and hang and compete? Tony Giovanni out at Solon always did the Wednesday nights, Solon Open practices. Like, there's not a weekend or a day I wasn't on the mat from that 8th grade year until, I graduated. So pure determination.
And what did those rooms teach you about, standards and expectations that maybe you weren't getting at your school?
I would say I was getting them at my school. But let me read you something. I kind of joked with you, Ben, earlier about the character that takes command. So let me read. I got to put on the readers, dude. I'm old. Give me a second here. So there was I'm not much into political speeches and all that hoo-yah, but President Reagan gave a speech to the Citadel back in 1993, highlighting the life of somebody no one really knows, Arlen D. Williams, and some sacrifices that individual made on a tragic day on the Potomac when an airline went down in D.C. Arlen gave his life saving five individuals. But the president was speaking to the Citadel where Arlen had gone to school, and he described, those things in life that, if you have chance and you can see it coming, that proverbial two the roads divide, you can see it, you can make a choice. But in reality, like the scriptural thief in the night, none of us know what's going to happen. And so he described it this way. He says, the character that takes command in moments of crucial choices has already been determined by 1,000 other choices made earlier in seemingly unimportant moments. It has been determined by all the little choices of years past, by all those times when the voice of conscience was at war with the voice of temptation, whispering the lie that it really doesn't matter. It has been determined by all the day-to-day decisions made when life seemed easy and crisis seemed far away, the decisions that piece by piece, bit by bit, develop habits of discipline or of laziness, habits of self-sacrifice or self-indulgence, habits of duty and honor and integrity, or dishonor and shame. Now, I didn't hear about that story until years later in life, but I think it describes, kind of what Sam Snyder described to you all in what, one of the mantras there at Ed's about, fire shaping the steel and steel sharpening steel. Your character is shaped over the years. And so did I learn any one thing from any one program? No. I did have a copy, Ben, of your Magical Edge, Ferg's,
Yeah,
playbook.
not mine. That's Ferg's.
Yeah. I mean, they gave that to me early on to try to convince me. There's nothing rocket science in there. It's pure application. It's pure determination. It's daily choices that shape the character of the individual. Are you going to work hard? Are you going to cut corners? Are you going to commit to each other as a team and as a community? Our mantra at Ignatius of being a man for others. Are you that, or are you an individual? So long-winded answer there to try to paint the picture of, I think everything I gained from those rooms is really everything I offered those rooms. We each made each other better.
That's great. And talk about choices too. We'll get into that senior year, where you sort of came into our story on the front lines where, Clint Musser, he was the guy in the state of Ohio. He declared as a freshman.
Come on, like, will you stop your madness? Like, what do you mean he was the guy? I was the guy. Like, look, if you look back, the progression of weight classes from 19, 25, 30, 35, I grew naturally. I respected the progression. Clint was on jumping 2 weight classes, like, Nah.
Well, choices. You made a choice. You made a choice to stay. You made a choice to not duck.
Hey, do you remember? This is one of my more humbling moments where I got brought into the Jesuit, the president of the school. I got lectured summarily, politely knife-handed by the Jesuit priest. Do you remember there was a Plain Dealer article asking a very similar question line that you're running down, and what about the choice?
This one?
Yeah. Where's the so be it?
Right down here at the bottom.
Yeah. And I said, so be it. And so that became like the little T-shirt that everyone hung up. Yeah, and I appreciate you finding the quote. That's awesome. Needless to say, the Jesuits weren't so fond of that. And I literally, that next Monday after that news article was dragged in and, tongue lashed about the need for humility and respect and blah, blah, blah. An important lesson. So, jokingly, I own the weight class. I thought I proved that. What is it, 5-1, 4-1? Is that a rivalry? Okay.
But Musser he had Johnson right below him.
Oh, hey, look, I totally understand the dynamics of the team and as Plaus was growing, the growth of your program, where your lineups needed to fit. Hey, I totally understand. That's not a critique at all. Especially as you look at how you matched up with Ed's. But I think that also highlights, historically, I was always viewed as an ally to both programs in the sense that I was guaranteed points that the other team wasn't going to get. Walsh wasn't going to get my points, so Ed's loved me. Ed's loved me because Walsh wasn't going to get, I was a constant, and Bill loved that about me. I had many discussions with Barger about that. He loved the fact that I was a guaranteed win against Ed's every time, and so he could bank on that. Now, I get it. At a certain point, your lineups didn't work out. You had to make adjustments, and it caused us to come to a clash, but I totally understood that.
And what was that like? I mean, like you said, you weren't gonna move. You had made your decision to stay at that weight. At any point, did you have doubt? Were you scared whenever you faced off Clint, knowing that he was a 2-time state champ, he was going for his 4th, that you were actually in the way?
Yeah. What was interesting is I loved the challenge of it. I mean, having run the table my junior year, there were some naysayers who were like, "Oh, it's a weak weight class. Vaughn really doesn't have any skill or talent." I'll call the BS flag on that. But so when someone of notable credibility and wrestling ability was going to be there, I was like, "All right, let's prove this. Let's run it." So I loved the fact that there was competition. I loved the rivalry of it, and the media sure loved it.
So it sounds a little bit like it kind of woke you up a little bit too, because the year before it was kind of, you ran through everybody, right? So it was it was an opportunity for you to really test yourself against the absolute best and see, here we are, let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, if you got to remember back in that time period, all of us wanted to go to college.
Yeah.
Now, I had never been, no one in my family had ever been. So, yeah, if I wanted to be in consideration for real colleges, you got to beat the real competition. Yeah, you can't just sit on the sideline and say I beat a nobody. And I'm not saying that San Xavier was a nobody, but you have to be able to compete against the premier talent in order to be considered for premier schools. So I loved it. It was great.
And one of the things we'd like to do on the Dynasty Effect is watch old matches, have you talk through them, but we wouldn't feel that it wasn't right if we didn't have the other side of the story on. So
Sure. Bring it.
we wanted to bring on our man, and the myth, the legend, Clint Musser.
Awesome.
Clint Musser.
From Walsh Jesuit. From Akron, Ohio, Walsh Jesuit High School.
The great wrestlers in Ohio, in fact, throughout the nation. We started at age 7 at the North Akron Wrestling Club.
3-time state champion.
He's a 2-time All-American.
Penn State wrestler Clint Musser.
In on a single, cut off of a double, and takes it.
You're an elite level coach in college, high school, every level. Now the girls rank.
There are not a lot of Mussers around.
The man, the myth, the legend, Clint Musser.
The champion from Walsh Jesuit,
Clint Musser!
Clint, what's up, brother?
John, what's going on, buddy?
You're looking good, man.
You too, man. You too.
I'm feeling
Looking
old.
Great.
I'm feeling old, man. You look good.
Well,
I feel old.
how we look and how we feel, might be two little different things. So it's great to see you, man.
Great to see you.
And thank you, first of all, for everything you're doing for our country, your service to our country, brother. I love it, man. I love it.
Much
It's great.
appreciated.
Yeah, I love this stuff. These guys are doing a great job, man.
Terrific.
It's a pleasure to get on here and share some time with you, man.
Thanks.
When was the
And
last
see,
time?
It's been a long time, man. It's been a long time. I don't know the last time I even saw you. So
Yeah, when was the last time you saw each other?
Yeah.
Probably last time we wrestled, I think it was at Big Tens or something like that. I don't know. It's been a long time. I think my wife has seen you more often and more frequently than I have, given her tenure at Penn State. But
oh yeah. Have we run into each other since college?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so either. So it's been a while. There you go.
Well, I'm glad that we can bring familiar faces back together. Before we get in the match, thank you for joining us, Clint.
Absolutely.
And taking the time. I know you've got practice today, probably later. But when you saw the series, John, and you saw your sort of part come in, that match, what were you thinking going into that match? We didn't really get into that because you weren't on our side, and we didn't really get into Clint's thoughts on that match, and we'll take a look at it. But before that match was happening, what was running through each of your minds?
Clint, go ahead. I'll let you start.
You talking about like the state finals match at that point?
Yeah. I'm sorry. We'll inform the audience. So, you guys met 4 times, 5 times, right?
5 times total.
5
Our
times?
state championship match was the 5th time that year that we had met.
And the record going up to that was 4-1 in favor of John. And I've seen all of those matches. It's funny because when I was collecting the archives, Clint, you were the one that sent them to me, but they always cut off right at the very end if it was a celebration or a victory.
Nice.
And so
I'm not responsible for that. That's somebody else.
So
who was editing your tapes, Clint? Who did you have?
You know what? My parents were pretty. Yeah, it was probably my mom, and she's a tough competitor in her own right.
Yeah.
She's a tough one.
So we've heard Clint's journey going through that decade and being a part of Walsh and their dynasty. And we've heard some of the effects that when you guys met for the 5th time in the state finals, some of the effects that it had as his run for the 4th state title was disrupted. But we never had you sort of both in a room And what I'd like you guys to do is sort of walk us through that match. But before we get into the actual match, John and Clint, sort of tell me what was going through your mind as it was leading up to that match.
Yeah. Yeah. No, by that point, like, I was a mess. Like, my head just wasn't right and I couldn't get it right. It's so, like you had mentioned, I had lost 3 times prior to John, and 2 of those were at the previous 2 tournaments, the districts and the sectionals and the finals. So we saw each other at sectionals, districts, and state in the finals. They were all close matches. They were all tough. And I couldn't get out of my head. I was not wrestling. It was the worst I was not wrestling well. I just wasn't. And leading up to the tournament, didn't handle my emotions well, didn't handle the preparation well. And honestly, like, I was just stuck in my head too much to just be able to go out and wrestle. Right. And so, I tried to get myself as up as I could. That's just the kind of competitor I am. I'm going to go out and I'm going to scrap and I'm going to do my best. But honestly, like, it just wasn't there. I think I scored a takedown. I think you scored first, John, and then I scored a takedown in the second period. And then you got a reversal or something along those lines. And that was pretty much it for the rest of the match. I couldn't get out. And so I knew that. You rode me out in the finals of districts, and that was 1-0. The weekend before that, it was a late takedown. I got hit for stalling late in a match. And I'm like, and so I took a shot to show that I wasn't stalling. We got into a scramble. You ended up on top. And so, yeah, that's how it went. And by the time we got to the state tournament, my head just wasn't right.
What about you, John? Where were you at?
Yeah, it's fascinating that Clint says that, because that was actually the coherent strategy starting it early in the season. Talking with my own coaches about how to strategize the long game. Not focus on the tactical now in moment, but project out. And so each time we wrestled, different techniques tried, different efforts put forth. Each time getting more confident in the approach. Each time undermining Clint's confidence in his own abilities, his own attack plan. And so the strategy all along was to get inside his head, to crack it. And you watch the warm-ups for that match. TV commentators and Brakeman made jokes and commentary about bouncing Vaughn on one side and Clint, but you could see the mental difference between the two of us. Clint was stressed under immense pressure in his own mind. The idea of wanting to win 4 overcame the moment and what he needed to focus on. And me, I'd already won one. Like, if I get a second one, awesome. If I don't get a second one, awesome. I'm still going to college. Like, there was no pressure on me, and it was all on Clint. And it played out that way in the match.
Well, to wrestle somebody, sorry, Ben. Go ahead. So, to go 5 times in one season, that's almost unheard of today. Like, to think about, to wrestle someone that many times. How important is that tactical approach as you think about wrestling the same guy over and over and over, and to evolve, through that process? How important is that?
When you have several matches like that in a row, it's critical, right? It's absolutely critical. I was it was interesting. So I caught the last bit of John talking there before we came on, and I love what he said. He said, he wasn't afraid of the competition. Like, he wanted the competition, right? We both were that way. We both felt that way, right? And we split our matches in the regular season. I think you won the CIT and I won the Top Gun. And that's, credit to our coaches, right? Our coaches are trying to get us out to the best competition. So, the best guys are going to be at the best places. We were there, right? The way it just worked out, fate had it that we were at sectionals, districts, and states. And honestly, like, there's no doubt, because then it becomes like a chess match at that point. It becomes very tight. You know each other so well, strengths, weaknesses, things along those lines. And those very little things make all the difference, right? And to John's point, like the confidence aspect. Like if had I won either one of those matches or both those matches, that would have played out very differently in my mind. But tactically, they had a good plan, good strategy, and it worked out.
Yeah, we joke about the dynasty clashes. I think you could say the state weighed in and tried to tip the scale because they kept moving Walsh around in terms of what section and district they were in. They're eventually getting dumped in with us. And then going through the meat grinder later in the years, where early in the years Walsh wasn't there. I mean, I'm not saying the state was trying to manipulate the game, but that had an impact. I mean, when I said earlier about the weight and talent of the Catholic schools throughout the state, and then you throw the bulk of us into the Northeast all into one meat grinder, it causes challenges. But I think to Clint's point, you got to have a coherent path through all that. You got to think through and have a strategy. We had a good approach. I think it built confidence every win. I think Clint's right. Had we not been in the same section or district, or had some of those matches gone a different way, the finals may have been fundamentally different. If he had come steamrolling in with only one loss in the season to be early into the state finals, maybe it's a different outcome. He might not have been as mentally rocked and unsure of himself. But having lost two of them in back-to-back weeks before the state finals, I mean, that's hard for anybody to overcome.
Let's take a look at that match, and I'd love to hear you guys thinking, if you pick up anything new or if you just love Mike Massa and Brinkman's commentary.
At 135 pounds in Division I, you're looking at the junior from Walsh Jesuit, Clint Musser, a two-time state champion. He's had one win.
I swear to God, he was going to wear a hole in the mat, walking across back and forth.
State champion with only one loss to Musser in his last 2 years. Musser lets him go. Vaughn knew that would happen. It's 3-1. Musser really needs to get a takedown here. And maybe a couple stalling.
Yeah, I knew it wasn't good giving up a takedown early against John. Like if I was going to win the match, I had to win it on my feet, right? So being down 3-1 going into the second, it's already, that's not a good sign early on.
Nice single by Musser. I think that was the sucker, wasn't it, Jeff?
Kind of faded into it, got him to lead that leg forward, came right in on it. Not finishing well here, though.
This is the one where I'm not sure I didn't rip body parts on Clint. Like I was hooked into him and I was not letting him go.
Yeah, this is where, so that's where we got into the scramble in the sectionals, and then you came out on top and scored there.
Yeah.
I'm feeling a little better now.
Pro's tied up. Now he's up by one again. So it's close.
I think it's 4-3 right now, right? Yeah.
More confident on his feet. You can almost feel the fact that neither wants to make an error. Clint safe. One takedown apiece.
It's fascinating. That was still the first period. I don't think we scored that many points in the 4 prior matches.
No, was that all on the first period? No, that was.
I've been
jumping
in
the second period. Yeah.
But this is the second period. This
is
the
match right
third,
there.
Yeah. This is, I think, the takedown you're talking about, Clint, where.
Yep. Yeah, that takedown, it could, that takedown needed not to happen. So to have any chance. So.
Yeah. Into the second period. Yeah, that's a tough one.
Probably not taken down, right? Not confident there. So, yeah.
That's what I was saying, right? The 6-3 after 2 periods was more points than we had ever scored in all the other matches combined. They had been like 1-1, 1-0. It's a me up 6-3 here, going for another takedown to put it away. This is where the confidence really started to play in.
Yeah. Yeah, think about scrapping, but going into that period, you got to get 2 takedowns. And the points are at a premium in these matches. They're hard to come by. So there we go.
And how
That's
about
it.
John's top game, like having such a big role in this match? Like his ability to be still good on top. Clint, where you have to, you can't win on the mat. You got to be on your feet, right?
Yeah. Getting roding out at the districts in the finals. That was. Yeah, that's another thing. You're like, okay, like going into this match, I'm not going to be able to pick down, right? That's not going to be an option. Although we tried to work on it that week with some of the coaches, which I thought that was kind of like, we met, wasn't strategically the right thing to do. What ended up happening is I got the crap written out of me in practice by college coaches that were like really good on top. Like that didn't boost the confidence going in. So no, man, to be able to have that in your belt, in your back pocket, know that you can put on a good ride like that, and it's going to make your opponent have a tough choice picking down. That's a great thing to have, especially in tight matches.
There you go. Did you see the socks and the shoes? Pulled
That's
over.
style. That's style. Don't you open with that little segment about my pulled out of my socks? Every one of us had to have our niche. I had them. It was
Nice.
look. The little niche I had was I was one of the first ones in all the crew to get the tattoo. I mean, Jimmy Wallace came in later with like the whole body thing and the Native American ones, but I was the first one with a tattoo, and everyone was like, "Ooh, look, the Catholic kid with a tattoo. He must be really bad." And you're like, "Yeah, let's go with
Well, it was on your calf. What was it?
it was a dragon."
Still there.
Now you got to love the Irish Catholic grandmother. You got to bleep this stuff out if you need to, Ben. But I went up to my Irish Catholic grandmother in the sophomore year, like, "Grandma, I want to get a tattoo." And she's like, "What are you talking about? Like, this tattoo thing?" And she's like, "If you want to ruin your body, you dumb jackass, go right ahead." I was like, "All right, I heard that as a yes." And, ran out to the tattoo parlor and came home, and she about had a coronary on me. Like, what did you just do? But, you had to have your stick.
It was a good style. I remembered it fondly. But so looking back on that rivalry between the two of you, what did that teach you about yourself, about your character? Like, where did you find that you guys pushed each other to make each other better? Do you remember that loss as something that made you not want to feel that again, Clint? Like, we'll start with John. Tell me, like, what did that rivalry have an effect? How did that have an effect?
I mean, it was a great friendship. I mean, Clint can speak to this. Like the amount of matches we sat in the corner together watching, tournaments, early in the careers with Jimmy and him and me and the crew. It was a great friendship. I mean, yes, there was competitiveness. Yes, we came head to head there at the end, but we made each other better from practices to meets to him cheering for me, crushing an Ed's kid to all of that. So it was character building, shaping in the sense that we fed each other and what we needed from each other and from the schools.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I always had a ton of respect for John, right? And honestly, like, I was looking forward to the opportunity to compete against him. It's my mindset was always like, if you're going to be the best, you got to beat the best. We got that, every day in the wrestling room, Frank, with Bill, right? Like, we were always going after those guys. And I thought, that's the point of wrestling, right? Wrestling, it's not just to go win a tournament. Like, if you're dodging people to go win a tournament, then, what's that all about? It's about getting out there against the very best and seeing what you got. So, I always had that kind of mindset. For me, that was, just a tough year in life in general, for me. And I learned a lot of lessons. Like, I learned that I'm not invincible, right? Like, I thought, for a stretch there, I'm like, I can do anything, right? Like, and I kind of, it started turning into a little bit of an arrogance there for a minute. And so it kind of puts you back, sits you back in your place a little bit. And, for me, that was a big, like, motivational tool going into my senior year. Right. And into college as well. You can't have a letdown. You gotta be on top of your game. Right. You got to stay hungry. And so that really motivated me going into my senior year. Again, senior year was ready to really kind of dominate either way. And that's how it went. That's how it happened. But, that was a motivating factor. And and a lesson, right? I learned a lot of lessons that year. I wish I would have learned them better for the long term, but it kind of was probably the beginning of the process of me, learning some important things I needed to learn in life. In regard to humility and just staying disciplined, staying focused, things along those lines.
Clint, I love you, brother, but that
that's
arrogance, that arrogance was a little more than a minute. I love you, brother, but yeah.
Yes. More arrogance. Jimmy, Clint, Adam, come on. Like, let's be honest here.
Yeah.
That's why they were Walsh.
Hey, I want to ask him that real fast, Ben. I want to ask him, how did John and wrestling him and getting rode out help him get better on bottom? I want to ask you that, Clint. How did that experience help you? Because by the time you got to Penn State, nobody could ride you, right? Like you got out all the time. Like, how did it help you?
Until I got to Penn State and I had to wrestle with John and Russ Hughes every day and all these Pennsylvania guys that live on top, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it helps you like focus on your game, right? Like, so John, he was really good at throwing legs in, right? I was very focused on a stand up and getting out. If a guy on top can put weight on your hands off the go, and you're open, they're going to throw that leg in, right? So, sometimes you got to adjust your strategy, right? You got to adjust your strategy to, to be successful in the situation, right? And to the point of the earlier point of, match strategy, being strategical, planning things on. I didn't make that adjustment, right? It took me a little more time to learn, like, what you do in that situation, how you keep those legs out, how you adjust the way you're going to work to your feet, up to your feet a little bit differently, right? And so, I had to put a lot of emphasis on that. Quite honestly, that was, making that adjustment in college to the mat wrestling, because I loved wrestling on my feet so much, probably kept me off the podium in the NCAAs an extra year. First year it was the weight cut. The weight cut ended up crushing me by the end of the season. After that, there's no reason I should have been All-American other than a tough ride in one of my matches at the NCAAs, right? Where if I get out, I All-American that year. So, those are part of the lessons you learn along the way.
And John, you guys wrestled again in the Big Tens, but Clint was the victor in that one, correct?
Yeah. Clint described the impact of cutting weight similarly on me. My first 2 years at 134, second two at 142. It was a lot. It takes a toll on the body. In my mind, I had a great college career. Illinois was about program's almost 100 years old. I graduated. I was 8th on their all-time win list, so I'm happy as shit with that. Didn't place at nationals, and that was a disappointment. But almost every one of those cases was I just could not stay healthy. My freshman year, I blew out my ankle and tore the ligaments in my ankle right at nationals in the opening round. Second year, tore the MCL at Big Tens and was hobbling through nationals. Third year was my junior year, was probably my best year and chance to place, and then ran into Roger for Pete's sake, which is a little painful. And then my senior year, I had torn discs in my neck. I was getting trigger point steroid injections every week. Couldn't even practice. I couldn't even hold my head up, and so I just could not stay healthy in college. The body, it just took too much of a toll.
Yeah, it was those were tougher cuts and a much more brutal time back in those days.
Yeah.
Yes, it was.
Anything, Clint, John, you'd like to say to each other before we let Clint go?
Clint, I wish you the best, man. I hear the coaching's going well for you. I'm super proud of you. I'm glad to see where you're going and shaping the next generation of athletes out there. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Thanks, John. And God bless you, buddy. Thank you for what your service to our country, like, from the bottom of my heart, that sacrifice. It's really an amazing thing. I learned more about, what that looks like during my time in America. And we had some guys that went into service, some alumni, Navy SEALs, stuff like that. And, what they do, what you guys do for our country is an amazing thing. And thanks for being part of my journey, man. I wouldn't change a thing. I wouldn't change a thing.
great partnership. Thanks, brother. We'll see you soon.
Take care, Clint. Thanks. All the best.
God bless, guys.
Thank you for taking part in that. I didn't know that you guys hadn't seen each other since so long, so that's great.
Yeah,
that you guys.
no one con.
But let's talk about your service. You went from University of Illinois, where you brushed with the Dynasty again with Jim Heffernan, and then you wrestled Roger Chandler. But then you went on to Case Western to get a law degree, and while you were there, you commissioned into the Marine Corps. Talk about that decision to do that, and where were you in your journey in sort of life, and how that
Yeah.
took place.
I mean, it's one of those things in life, you're still struggling to figure out what you want to do. None of us really know. I'm 51 years old, and I'm still trying to figure out what do I do when I grow up. Back then, Mark Johnson and Jim Heffernan at Illinois were outstanding coaches, great mentors, really fathers. It's why I went to Illinois. I mean, I was getting recruited. Cornell was number 2 in the choice list. Coming from Ignatius to go to the Ivy Leagues was like, the dream. Jack Spates was the coach. A little sus. I'm not gonna lie, nothing against Jack, but it was like a sleazy car salesman. I was just like, I just can't. And you meet Mark Johnson, who's just a physical stud. You meet Jim Heffernan, who's just the intellectual stud about wrestling, and so truly helped me grow as a person. But then you turn around at some point and you're like, okay, what do I do with this hit degree? Yeah, I had an East Asian history degree. You're like, am I going to be a teacher? Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm going to law school. Just kind of punting the decision really down the road. And then you're in law school and you're like, what am I going to do with this? Am I going to go into corporate law? Hey, there's this military thing. Let's just keep lily padding forward in life, trying to figure out what your path really is. Marine Corps was a perfect fit for me. Alpha mentality, storm the beach. Have loved all 27 plus years of it at this point. Been a roller coaster in terms of experiences and things that I've done, things that I've seen, but wouldn't trade it for the world.
When you think about wrestling and the military, it demands sacrifice, right? It demands service to others. How did wrestling help you there?
Yeah, I think the combination of wrestling and then the education and the mentorship I received at Ignatius. I mean, you said it, that the men for others. It's a call to service. Even in our upbringing and the education we all received in the Jesuit system, to where I landed. My wife routinely, asks, "Well, why'd you do this?" Because it's in service to others. It's my way to give back in something I love to do and something I'm good at. But it allows me to touch so many other lives throughout my career, both in the legal community in the sense of dealing with other lawyers and shaping their growth and development, but the 2 command opportunities I've had leading embassy security guards throughout East Asia Pacific to the 800 security and emergency services civilians and Marines I led at Camp Pendleton. Like I've had a roller coaster of an enjoying ride.
And you've talked about it before, but there may be people that don't know, but you were wounded over in Iraq. Walk us through that story real quick, but also maybe keep in mind too and express how wrestling maybe helped you through some of those moments that you were going through over there.
You'd be fascinated to see how many wrestlers are actually in the military and or the Marine Corps. I mean, there is a commonality, a life call for many of us. Even my battalion commander, when I was a captain, 2004, when I got wounded in Iraq, my battalion commander was a lieutenant colonel, was a wrestler. Routinely would grab me in the sand, try to pick me up and slam me. I'd have to show him a few things and humiliate the colonel, but humbly and respectfully. But throughout my career, even one of my last duty assignments was out at the Marine Aircraft Wing, 3rd Marine Aircraft Wing in California. The chief of staff and the deputy assistant wing commander were both wrestlers, one at Penn State, one at George Mason, and just great individuals. So a commonality in experience. But to your point about Iraq, I always joke, my wife doesn't find it funny, but I always joke, they didn't teach the lawyer how to duck. Like every Marine a rifleman. There is a truism in that. Truly, they expect all of us to be a rifleman, and combat comes. You better be able to call for fire. You better be able to maneuver under fire. You better learn how to duck. Didn't work out so well. The attack into Fallujah, 2004, November, the second attack. There happened to be a number of incidents of detainee handling to law of war questions to targeting that prompted the executive officer, the intelligence officer, and the human exploitation officer, me, to go out on his convoy. Hindsight, probably should have just stayed back in the firm base, but we found ourselves literally in the lead element, actually the lead entity in the entire attack into the city. You kind of look to your right and your left and you realize nobody's there because they're all behind you. And you're like, that's not a good place to be. Ended up taking heavy fire and artillery and mortar rounds, and lost part of my hand, amputated right thumb, right index finger, took a blast across the leg. Humbling in the experience, scary in the moment, but rebounded well and continued on.
What was it like in that moment to be shot? I mean, like, what's that like?
Yeah. As the rounds were coming in, you quickly realize you're in a bad spot. And so at that time, we had modified up armor vehicles where the door handle was kind of to the upper part. And normally you would turn, grab the handle, and latch it. The round impacts were so forceful that I didn't feel comfortable doing that. So I was literally putting my face down in the base plate of the middle of the vehicle, and I'm reaching back to the door to try to close it. That blast took my hand, took off the thumb, index, tip, came through the leg. You sit up and you're in that shock moment. You don't even realize what's happened. You're looking down at your hand and the gloves that used to be there that are not there, the fingers that used to be there but are just now blood and tissue. A little bit of shock. You don't feel it. I felt pressure in my leg, but with all the gear you have on, you can't see. And so I'm feeling around and you're feeling down into your groin area and you're like, wait, is it all there? And literally the shrapnel had punctured through my leg all the way through the meat of the thigh, straight through. And, big old pieces of shrapnel were pointing through my inner thigh, close to things that I don't like to talk about. You have that humbling moment of like, whoa, that almost went really bad. But at the same token, I count myself lucky. We had a unit of almost 1,500 Marines and sailors. Almost 500 of us were wounded in some way, shape, or form. 33 of our Marines paid the ultimate sacrifice. The human exploitation officer I was describing to you went out with us, didn't get into his vehicle in time, ended up losing his leg at the knee. And so I look at my injuries and merely a flesh wound. I'm fine. Well, get me back into the fight. It took me a while to get back into the fight, but all things are good now.
And like we mentioned before, does that mentality that you have come from the sport, or was it honed through the sport of wrestling? Because most people they're like, I'm done, right? At that point.
Glutton for punishment, is that what you're trying to say? Yeah, I think the wrestling teaches us not just humility, but the perseverance to push through things that are uncomfortable, whether that be cutting weight to the matches, to the injuries that you may sustain. It definitely helped hone an ability and a character in me. As I read earlier, the character in us is already there. It just, each choice we make, we're either refining that character or we're treading backwards on our character. And I think, the perseverance and the things I learned in wrestling, the commitment to the team, commitment to each other, your fellow Marines, your fellow teammates, are the things that help keep you alive in environments like that.
And you're an attorney, in the battlefield. Did you ever go back out into the field, or were you back in?
Now, I got medevaced out, which was a fascinating movement plan from the city of Fallujah to Balad Air Base to Ramstein Air Base in Germany to the Bethesda Air Base or Naval Base in DC. We were out on the West Coast. My wife was able to get to Bethesda just as I was getting wheeled back in for surgery. So it was a crazy time getting back in the theater, back home, out of theater. Yeah, amazing.
And so you're awarded the Purple Heart. You stay on as a Marine. You're now, a legal, right? Is that basically what you were doing as a colonel as you got promoted throughout the ranks? What did you start to, tell us, take us through that?
Yeah, I mean, throughout my career, the early evaluation was centered in terms of staying in medically. It was, well, can you still walk? Can you still talk? Sure, you're a lawyer. You're good. You know, the infantry officer is somebody who requires the ability to pull the trigger more routinely. Some of my injuries may have been larger impediments. Throughout my career, I have served as a legal advisor, kind of as an in-house counsel to various commands at from 1-star through the 3-star level. I've done prosecution work, criminal defense work, environmental law, a spattering of different things. In the Marine Corps, I'm an unrestricted line officer, which means I don't have to do just legal things. And so I've had opportunity to command operational units that are not legal. And then most recently leading the Marine Corps Defense Organization, the Criminal Defense Organization, and now leading the Military Commissions Defense Organization.
And you were awarded the honors of Brigadier General. Explain to me, what is a Brigadier General?
Yeah, a 1-star general has ultimate command authority over those assigned to him. And so right now I have about 260 individuals assigned to me. In my 06, my colonel command, I had 800. So it's not tied to the size of the formation, but it's tied to the responsibilities and the criticality of the mission set and that. There's approximately 65 general officers in the entire Marine Corps. And then we get a few extras to fill in joint responsibilities. And so I'm one of a select group, highly humbled and privileged to be in that group of a small percentage. I think the Marine Corps is 171, 175, depending on how you want to count math, 1,000. 65 are generals. So I'm in a small, pointy tip, elite group, and truly humbled by that. I mean, it's not something you aim for. And if I do A, B, and C, I'll get to general officer. That's just not how it works. The institution truly evaluates your character, your leadership potential, your future, worthiness of the leadership opportunities and the potential you have to shape others. So there's no magical calculation to how you get here.
John, what do you think is like the number one thing they look for in regards to leadership?
It truly is that character.
Okay.
You talk about individuals, you know who they are right out of the gate. I mean, you can truly assess an individual's character, their judgment, their credibility, their trustworthiness. All of those things are innate to an individual. You can't learn character. It's who you are. It's been molded. I mean, we each grow up in an environment where maybe your church shaped you, maybe your family shaped you, maybe the neighborhood shaped you. Over time, that matures with those you hang out with. It matters. Hang with the wrong crowd, it leads to bad things. To our description of hanging out in the wrestling rooms, you hang out with good people, you get better, and you become a good person. So a lot of those things are innate in an individual, but you become very savvy to identifying those characteristics and those traits. And those who don't have it, doesn't mean they're bad. They just may not be the one that you want leading others.
And I saw some photos online of your induction ceremony, and I saw Coach Heffernan creeping in the background in one of the photos.
I told you, I chose Illinois because of Mark and Jim.
Right there, I see him in the background in the brown jacket, just creeping.
Yeah.
And then you sent me this photo. So, I mean, the fact that you had two of your coaches, from college at, your ceremony, it just speaks volumes to sort of the effect that they had on you. I think that leads, into that
think about
question of
that was I met them 30 years ago, and our lives have stayed connected. Every time we travel the country and drive cross country from East Coast to West Coast, I stop at Illinois. I stop in, I see Jim, I see Rebecca, stop in and see Jim and or Mark and Linda in the Illinois family. I mean, it was why I chose them, because they have character. They are people of integrity and leadership who care about you as a human. It's not about wins or losses. I mean, gotta be careful with Mark. Mark was all about the wins. I mean, Mark was an in-your-face. Even though he went to Michigan, he coached at Iowa, but he was an in-your-face, time now, intensity. And then you had Jim, who was, I'll strategize you to death and think and technique you and outwit you. Loved that about them, but they became father figures. They became family, and we have stayed together. And so for them both to make it out to my promotion was extremely humbling, and my family loved it, and we've stayed connected all along.
which leads me to my next question, which is what we ask everyone here. If you were to have your Mount Rushmore of wrestling, regardless of how many faces, heads, how many mountains you'd like to have, who would be on that?
Yeah, I'll give you my Mount Rushmore of Ohio high school wrestling, kind of in my time period, right? Because we'll keep it more into that realm. Alan Freed, without question. St. Ed's. Mike Buddy, St. Ignatius, 2-time state champ, 171, 189. Unbelievable athlete. And Mike, state football champ as a receiver, baseball stud, scholarship Wake Forest, played with the Yankees, now athletic director at TCU. But watching him wrestle was magical. Or he had such talent, and he wasn't a bulky 189. He was the thin guy. He was the one eating on the scale, like it was offensive. But he could. I think his senior year he ran the table, and almost every win was a pin or a bonus win. I mean, there was nobody even close. So Mike, without question. After that, Steve St. John, back in the day, again, coming through the early 90s, watching Joe's win the state title and their runner-up the year before. Steve was a specimen who went on to Arizona State. Marcus Malika, without question, a specimen, without question. Watching some of his matches, especially early on, was awe-inspiring. So those are my four. Chandler's probably close up there. Jeggy Franklin from Lorraine Southview is up there. I mean, just a true specimen who nobody could really touch in his own right. So I'll keep it in the kind of that grouping for now. I mean, there's a lot of others, but yeah, I think my career, even when I went back to coach, I got to see a ton of the Eds guys and the older Walsh guys. Different impact when you're kind of the older guy watching them versus you're in the heat of it, sitting on the side of the mat watching Bill Spleet or Petch in matches at the districts, and it changes your perspective a little bit.
And you're essentially, I guess, a coach now, right? You oversee a bunch of people. How do you motivate the people under you when it's maybe life altering, or there's stakes are much higher?
Because there's no one type model series. They're all different. Every human is different. The true thing that sets you apart as a leader is your ability to connect with more than just one. It's your ability to influence a wider spectrum. And sometimes that means talking to one different when you talk to the next. Sometimes, the pat on the back to some, to the knife hand on the others. Each individual responds differently. So the talents of the true leadership is being able to hone in on that person's personality and traits and get the most out of them. It's not trying to get the most out of the formation or the team writ large. It's finding each individual's strength and cultivating that in them to become the best they are, and that in the aggregate translates into the team's success or the unit's success.
John, would you say that human connection with someone is the most important thing?
Yeah, I think relatability, connectedness, you can preach on high all day long, but if you can't relate to the person, if you can't, in Marine Corps, we use the kneecap to kneecap. If you can't get up close and personal with them, then it's hard to connect. Now, this generation is slightly different. It's a different type of connection, and I think that requires a lot of adaptability and us as leaders to us as coaches. What worked in our generation, the Fergs approach to the Bill Barber approach to, the Mark Johnson approach, like some of those have to mature with the audience because this group of young men and women are fundamentally different in some respects, very same in many others, but you have to be able to hone in on that and connect with them.
And I heard that you're also a black belt, correct?
Yeah, the Marine Corps adopted a martial arts program years ago to try to enhance hand-to-hand combat. It's kind of a hybrid of a jiu-jitsu system with grappling. Probably in more lay sense, it is UFC in some sense. How do you do tap outs? How do you do positions, throws? So the wrestler in me definitely allowed me to breeze through a lot of that stuff. How to do the hip throws and all the kind of how to choke out. Like, oh, I do that all the time. I did that on Clint every day. So made it easy. Loved it. The body's not as young anymore. A little harder to do that stuff these days. I commend Clint for still being out there on the map because it is not easy. The body's falling apart faster than I can keep it together at this point.
Well, I got one last question, Frank, and then I'll pass the mic to Frank. But my last question is, you've been a wrestler, you've been a Marine, you've been a lawyer, you're a general, of all of those, which one has sort of shaped you the most in your life?
I go back to President Reagan's comment about the character that takes command is the things that have shaped you all along. I don't think any one of those. I think it's all of those in the aggregate, and those aren't the only ones. Husband, father, son, brother. I mean, there are so many things in our lives that shape who we are, that shapes the character that takes command, because you don't know when something is going to happen in life, in combat, on the wrestling mat. But what type of character is going to come forward really is the culmination of all the things that have happened to you in your life and all the small choices that you've made.
It's all about choices. Frank?
It really is. Yeah, when I think about everything you've talked about, I want to ask, like, moving forward in your life, I mean, what does purpose look like for you? Is it to coach, to teach, to mentor, or is it something else?
Frank, that's a challenge I'm wrestling with because at some point you hang the tree seat up. The wrestling shoes at some point got hung up, and there was a stark realization on the wrestling shoes. I'll come back to that in 1 second, but at some point I got to hang up the utility uniform and figure out what I do next. What is that? I don't know yet. I'm still trying to grow as a person, grow as a husband, grow with my kids. I was blessed or cursed with 4 daughters. That's an amazing ride, emotional, but lovely. What does my role look like? It probably shifts to a supporting role more than a leadership role with my children and my wife and the dreams that they have and how I can help them. They've been along for the ride for a long time, a lot of moves, a lot of crazy experiences. And my wife receiving that crazy call of it's okay, but your husband is a little banged up. Those are not easy things for a spouse or a family to live through. So we'll see. But go back to my point about at some point you got to hang it up. So I wrestled, went back, coached at Ignatius. Rolled around for a couple of years while I was in law school. I then got into the Marine Corps, and the first duty station was Okinawa, Japan. and they wrestling was still big. It was before we did the martial arts program, so the Marine Corps wrestling program was still fairly robust, and they still had wrestling tournaments even out in Okie. And so the tournament hit the radar. And my wife's like, "Hey, you gonna do that?" I'm like, "Yeah, I can do that." Still got the shoes, so I can still pull the socks down. I was all it. We went to breakfast that morning and got to the gym weigh-ins, and I was like a half pound over, like 160 weight class or something. I don't know. And I was like, well, I guess if I hadn't had breakfast, I would have made weight. But I'll just I'll go up to the next weight class. What's the big deal? Next weight class is like 189. That's a no joke jump, like 30 pounds. So I go out there. My first match was against some farm boy from Nebraska. This dude was huge. Like he was all of 189. Had been shucking pay his entire life, and muscles. And we shook hands. I billy clubbed that dude like Roger Chandler did. Like snapped his head down, cradled him. Like 15 seconds, I was done. That 15 seconds, I was having a heart attack. And so the tournament plays out. I win the tournament. My wife's over there fanning me with the towel. Like, he'll be okay. And I'm like, I am so done. I'm like, that's it. I love this sport, but I'm not young anymore. I can't keep doing this. And so hung up the wrestling shoes back in 2001, 2002 time frame. Haven't put the shoes back on. Socks haven't gone down over it since. But I got to figure out what that next life looks like. My wife has a love for horses. So we have 10 acres and 3+ horses at this point. So that may be my future. I'm the stall boy. I muck stalls. She rides them and enjoys them. I just clean up. But we'll see.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a great life to sort of ride out into the sunset,
You would think, man, but that's a lot of work.
Yeah, well, it is work. I mean, it's full time.
The snowstorm winter, ice again, and I'm dying out here trying to take care of these horses. I'm like, who's a good idea with this? Like, this is crazy.
Those are some big pets. What are your horses' names?
We have Chloe is our older quarter horse. Ellie is a quarter horse. Who's a little bit younger. My wife rides her a lot. And then my daughter, Vaughn and Musser, which is a big old boy, Amato. He sits about 16, almost 17 hands tall. So when you sit on the back of him, you're sitting at about 23 feet in the air, and you're like, this is no joke. If I fall off this bad boy, it's a long way down. So we enjoy the horses. I'm not sure what the next phase of life holds, but I'm excited for it. And my family has truly sacrificed for me, so I look to pay it forward to them as we transition here.
Well, thank you for your sacrifice for us and for all you do.
Yeah, John, thank you so much.
We're super proud of you. Again, like I mentioned, this is the Dynasty Effect, so you're a part of the Dynasty Effect. You didn't go to our schools, but you were right in the middle of that Royal Rumble, and you were a key factor, and you helped us, you helped Walsh, and your story just got greater as you went on. So keep doing great things, keep safe out there.
I appreciate it. And for both of you, thank you for what you're doing. It seems like, hey, you're just having fun, but in reality, you're drawing a magnifying glass back on pivotal period, not just in Northeast Ohio, but in Ohio's wrestling history, and on the lives of so many people. Again, the reconnectedness, the bringing rivals together to sit down in a room and laugh with each other today about what they were so stressed about 40 years ago. That's no small feat. So thank you for what you both are doing and your continued efforts to draw emphasis on this. The docuseries is outstanding, and the podcast is even a build on that. So thank you so much.
We'll appreciate it. No, it's been an awesome time getting to reconnect with everyone. So thank you for taking part.
Thank you.
Appreciate all you do for us, and stay safe out there.
All right, Cameron. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Take care.
You, John.
All the best, John. Bye. All right, man. That was awesome. John is amazing. And again, his story is completely different than all of ours, and it's sort of an offshoot of the Dynasty, which is exactly what this podcast is about. So having someone like him on who had such a meaningful part in our story combined, and then seeing him and Clint reconnect together for the first time in who knows how many years, decades, was great. And they were both great sports about it. And, it was great to hear both of their sides of the story.
It was, and they had, such a mutual respect towards each other. You could tell, and that's what this sport is all about, and that's what the Dynasty did, right?
Yeah, no, and I think that's what we do. We bring enemies together 30 years later, and have a laugh at what we thought was so important, but had profound effects on our lives to the hopefully to the better. And John's gone off to do great things, and we can't thank him enough for his service. So another great episode, Frank. Thank you for joining me, and we'll see you on the next one.
Sounds good, buddy. Thank you.
All the best. Later.
The story needs to be told just for the fact that it was a great time for high school sports. It really was.
You got the bad boys here and you got the good guys here. And then they went at it for 10 years.
It was a strong narrative with a good arc to it. And I think people could see that it wasn't going to be replicated anytime soon.
You look back on it,
like you're doing a podcast on it right now.
like that's how big it was, and that's what I wanted to be a part of.
At the end of the day, it was trying to help kids become their best selves at a really high level. And so from that stance, it's a story that's very American.
I think that's a good way to explain it.